Chapter 46. The Pursuit of Thrill. The kobolds journeying back to Hetaria had been dropped off at an oasis by the Great Phoenix. This was not the same oasis that the kobolds back in Londinium took refuge at so many years ago, but one significantly far away. As to why the Great Phoenix dropped the kobolds off at this location had remained unknown. During the kobolds' stay in the oasis, they came across many travelers. Most of the visitors had been the real Shematarians displaced from their home, Hamatarians, and peoples known as Asarians. The real Shematarians had looked quite similar to the Atlanteans. The real Shematarians told the kobolds about how they were displaced so long ago by that horrible league of Conquer and their leader Frogestein. This one Shematarian told the kobolds how these Frogesteins made up these bogus history about how the dark people were inferior, and kicked them out of their land, promised to them by that monster super doctor. The kobolds heard stories from the people who had been booted out of Shemataria, and heard stories about how this was once a glorious land. According to their stories, the Shematarians were once loyal to the dance, but this was before the Great Phoenix came. When it came to the Azarians, they had been displaced in recent times by these hypercordos from the lands north of the mountains. The kobolds understand this to mean Hetaria. One Azarian was from a nation originally known as Han, and tells how the hypercordos sought support from these monsters known as sorcerers. Now the kobolds remembered the sorcerers who exploded in the battle before their mission to Atlantis to destroy the book. According to the Han traveler, the sorcerers long believed that Azaria possessed some secret powers and hidden knowledge. She then told stories about how the sorcerers slaughtered many of their people and dissected them in hopes of finding out their secret powers. After some fruitless searches, they gave up and took apart the whole nation of Asaria, and hoped to find still some more secret powers. Still, the sorcerers found nothing. The nation of Asaria always tried to teach their wisdom with compassion, self-control, harmony, and balance, but the sorcerers saw this power as nonsense. After this disappointment, the sorcerers bullied the nations of Han, Aniki, Gorayo, Sinashia, Samara, and Indoshia out of their land, and erected these hideous structures and renamed the region Egleftios. One thing Egleftios did that was never part of Asarian culture was to conquer and anesthetize pain, and possibly do away with death. Now the Asarians always understood that death and suffering have their places, and could not only be transcended, but was unwise to try to defeat them. Frankly, these Egleftians, originally from Hetaria, found that the Asarians had the same magic as Hetaria did. According to the accounts of refugees from Egleftios, the misdemeanant founders of the nation joined the sorcerers who they saw as more truthworthy than the elders of Hetaria, and sought to start history all over again. These Iglesians saw that history functioned in a progressive fashion, and that their nation of Iglesias would create a great utopian society. The only thing that needed to be done was to start a bloody revolution and destroy all those who were loyal to the elites, which was anyone who did not want them dead. Now, the only way the society would be able to create a utopian peace was to find a way to control the people to fall in line through benevolent means. The kobolds understood why this tonic was used. Thanksgiving and Christmas. Despite feeling guilty about having quit like he did, Milo was happy to have Thanksgiving off, and not having to work at that stupid nursing home for 7 days straight on the one. On Thanksgiving, Milo did not tell the family yet that he had resigned. Milo had feared that he would be judged or lectured for his decision. Frankly, Milo was feeling like he had been getting a lot of lectures about these kind of jobs and was utterly sick of them. Milo was sick of being told how he needed to accommodate the systems and how that's reality and welcome to the real world, and all about being financially secure. Milo only told Matt, as he was the only one who was awake in the game room after the Thanksgiving dinner. As people well know, turkey has that effect on people. Unfortunately, that year Milo did not make much of an appetizer due to what happened, and he did cook some rye snack, but ended up burning it after not being in quite the right mind after what happened with the nursing home job. Otherwise, this holiday had been quite nice. Milo was in a much better mood that day, and as he was no longer under the burden of this horrid job. Truly, Milo had been utterly burned out from this nursing home, and was happy never to return to this place. Sort of. The next evening, Milo went to Connor Finnegan's for drinks with Lydia, Ryan, and his friend Ted. Ryan's sister Maureen dropped the three off at Connor Finnegan's and would be taking an Uber home. Milo was happy to be at the food service facility that was not a nursing home and had not been serving gruel reserved for the elderly. On Saturday, Milo, Ray, and Salvatore went on a hike in the Summerwhite Woods. This is when Milo broke the news to Salvatore. On the way to the Summerwhite Woods, Ray drove past Grandpa Paul's house, which was the first time Milo had seen the estate since Grandpa Paul had passed away. This is when Milo told Salvatore that Grandpa Paul had passed away. On the first Sunday of Advent, Milo went to St. James Cathedral for Mass. Ray and Margaret and Lydia went to the early Mass without music. Now Milo would not have gone during the Adventide. They only went to the early Mass because Lydia needed to get back to Akron. Before church, Milo got breakfast with his family, and then left when they went to drop Lydia off at Brian's mother's house. Milo arrived at the cathedral a half hour early. When Milo got into the church, the choir was practicing this Christmas anthem known as Where Shepherds Lately Knelt by Carl Schock. The church had been a bit chilly, considering that this had been an old unheated church in the beginning of December. Otherwise, the opening hymn they did an opening hymn that resembled the Vespers chant, and based on Psalm 25, I believe. Then they sang the Galeno song 122, I Rejoiced When I Heard Them Say. That song Milo heard a long time ago at St. Timothy's 15 years ago. The offertory hymn that morning was O Come, O Come, Emmanuel. They only did the first 2 verses. Otherwise, it was a well-done mass. After the closing hymn, which was Lift Up Your Heads, Eternal Gates, the choir sang the anthem Where Shepherds Lately Knelt after Mass. When Milo was leaving Mass, he saw his cousins Julie and her daughters. When Milo got home, Ray and Margaret knew that Milo had been at the cathedral for Mass. On Monday, Milo and Salvatore went on a brief trip to Akron for the day, as he found a natural therapist in that town to handle sports-based injuries. Now Milo started getting a bit annoyed with all the commercialistic Christmas music being blasted all over the place, and all this trying to get people to shop. For most of the day, Milo and Salvatore were at a strip mall doing some early Christmas shopping and trying on some different restaurants. That evening, Milo had dinner with the Filentinos. That Thursday, Vito took a visit, and Milo told him all about quitting the nursing home job and going with Salvatore to Akron. Milo had told Vito that he went to a strip club, but he meant to say the strip mall. Now this was considering the fact that Vito is a Jehovah's Witness. Vito then told Milo that he better not be going to any strip clubs, but got a laugh as Milo corrected himself. When it came to the job, Milo explained that he could no longer work at a nursing home in good conscience, and claimed that they had been purposely trying to take away the independence the elderly had left, and treated them like objects. Now Milo was always on the defensive about this for a while, as he was afraid of getting another lecture about not being able to handle the workaday world. A week later, Milo met with the career agency in order to take the next steps. Milo's advisor suggested this agency that provides job coaching and job assessments. This advisor understood why Milo would not want to work in a nursing home, and she explained how many people have had trouble working with healthcare facilities. Otherwise, Milo was still in a better mood. Milo harbored no bitterness towards the nursing home. After the resignation, Milo even sent Gloria a thank you letter and apologized about the job not working out and not looking the letter over. Now Gloria was not going to hold this against Milo, as she knew the company was not the easiest company to work for, and that nursing home jobs can be quite tough. In fact, they said the nun who works there is a real psychopath, a nasty, horrid tyrant, unworthy to ever have the vows of a nun. Around the same time, Aunt Jane's father had passed away. Eustace, Samantha, and Sylvester never knew this grandfather too well, as they had spent most of their time in Florida that week. So then one day, the Biancatellis hosted Uncle Lear and Sylvester over for dinner. Around this time, Sylvester was in a holiday concert that Milo considered going to, in hopes that maybe Parisa and her family would be there. That week, Milo then watched Lord of the Rings, all three of them, but still had a bit of a hard time understanding the movies, as he never really read the books. One night when Lydia was returning home for a break, Milo made a massive Mediterranean dinner. Milo had a lamb leg that he got from the Philipsville market that he had seen Amira at a while back before starting the job. Milo made a dish from Greece, Italy, France, and Spain. To be honest, Milo bit off a bit more than he could chew. Milo made some Greek lamb, Italian bread with prosciutto, a French, a French gratin, and some Spanish gazpacho. On Amira's birthday, Milo and Ray attended a Vesper service at St. James. As for the service, this was quite interesting. They had left after a pretty bad game at Uncle Mike's. The service had been sung by this little girl in the children's choir. The service had many chants, including this hymn, Creator of the Starry Sky, Creator of the Stars of Night, based on an ancient chant, Conditor al Mesa Siritum. Then there was the same Vesper chant and the Magnificat. That night, Milo had some leftover lamb for dinner, as he had eaten already quite a bit at the game at Uncle Mike's. The next week, Milo had a nasty cold and had not fully recovered until Thursday. For some reason, this cold made Milo relive nasty memories of the previous holiday. As to what this was all about, Milo was not sure. This seemed to be quite a common occurrence at times. This year, the Biancatellis would be hosting Christmas Eve, as the Fiorentinos were having some work done on their house, and the kitchen and dining room would be unusable. On Wednesday, Milo wanted to go to a Christmas concert at Side Upon High. Unfortunately, he got the time wrong. Milo started to complain about how his social life seemed to be so lacking so much, and was not sure what to do. Margaret suggested Milo find an online forum. Now Milo would not have that, and considered such a thing as only antisocial jerks use to communicate. Plus it seemed too impersonal for Milo. Not to mention he wouldn't have anybody to do stuff with, just a talk online. On Thursday, Lydia and Samantha took Ashlyn, Melina, and Abigail to Olive Garden for dinner, and then back to their house, the Biancatellis' house, to decorate cookies. Milo put on some Christmas music, including some church-style chorals, such as Joseph Liba. Margaret absolutely hated that piece, considering that it was one of those Renaissance-trained choir voices that just sounded a bit too slow But Milo still put on like those standard songs like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Frosty the Snowman, along with this song known as Song of the Stable, which Marlena found a bit depressing. On that Sunday, Milo went to the newly built Ishtavan with Salvatore, Eustace, and Rob for lunch. After lunch, Milo attended a Christmas concert at St. James. This was the sort of British-style services of carols and lessons common in like King's College, often in the Anglican Church. They sang many hymns such as Once in Royal David City, O come all ye faithful, O come Emmanuel, and Ave Maria, O little town of Bethlehem, hark the herald angels sing, and of course, Where Shepherds Lately Knelt, by Carl Schock. At the concert, Milo saw quite a few people he did not recognize, and the church was pretty crowded for the concert. Otherwise, Milo thought he saw Wilma. During the middle of a mission, there was a beggar outside in the church's vestibule, as she could not pay her rent. Now Milo was probably very charitable with her. As to whether she was an angel or not had not been there, or if she was just a beggar. After the concert, Milo arrived at Uncle Mike's for the remainder of the Chicago Bears football game. After the game, Milo went to a penance service at St. Timothy's. Now Milo had been still feeling a bit guilty about quitting his job the way he did, and had to get this off his chest. Plus Milo seemed to have just suddenly lost his Christmas spirit that week. Milo wondered if he had to deal with the cold he had the week, memories from the previous year, or remembering the Christmas where Uncle Giorgio got worse. At the service, the opening hymn was Savior of the Nations Come. For confession, Milo had Father Monsignor Warburton. Milo told Monsignor all about what happened with having left his job, and some other questions he had about reason and faith. Plus Milo was a bit interested in why, and also wanted to know why morality did not seem so black and white anymore like it had just a few years ago. The Christmas that year was held back at Leo and Aunt Jane's. On that weekend after Christmas, Ben came in town and had him and Rob and Milo and Salvatore out for lunch one day. Then the day after Christmas, the Rumcorns came in town. That weekend of Christmas, the Biancatellas went to church with Grandpa Tony, as they had not seen him on Christmas Day due to being in the nursing home. On the Sunday after Christmas, this is what happened. Sorry. Then on that Sunday, Milo, Lydia, Ryan and his family was on a wine tasting tour. On New Year's Day, the Bianca Telosa saved Mr. Banks in Peters. This was the movie retelling the story of kind of revised story about what really happened when Disney tried to get the rights for the Mary Poppins series by P. Travers. The establishment of Angel and Travis. By this time, Oscar, Alexander, and Darrell called for the establishment of the television show Angel. By this time, Alexander knew that Lance needed some assistance thanks to Brutus violating his agreement. Alexander knew well that they needed a show even more extreme than Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Angel is a spin-off of Buffy. Darrell knew well that it was time for the show to be established in order to kickstart the days of adventure and put an end to the domestication at the hands of Putama and Helectivus. When news reached Brutus, he was utterly furious. Brutus was no fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but was utterly repulsed by Angel. As we recall, Brutus became quite horrified about the way his power was undermined when Buffy the Vampire Slayer became popular, and was not about to let this happen again. As to what Brutus had planned had yet to be revealed. Brutus considered the show to have bad influences full of ambiguity. Brutus's greatest complaints were that the line between good and bad guys was utterly blurred, with demons being good guys. Far away from Brutus also had taken issue with the demon Lorne, and considered him to be a flamboyant fruit trying to normalize sodomy. Lance did not take too well to Brutus's choice of words, and explained that sodomy is the wrong word for homosexuality, based on a gross misunderstanding thanks to uneducated fundamentalists. During that time, Lance got the upper hand again, after Brutus seized the throne for the last few months. With Lance's brain, he kept getting heckled by some spies for an unknown location. One of the spies Lance found out was part of the Parabdi apprenticeship, but turned over to the master that he refused to speak of. By this time, Lance made it his business to rescue the spy known as Travis. Now Lance always had a soft spot for potential Parabdis. Lance found where Travis resided, and constantly tried to persuade him to return back to the Parabdi apprenticeship and help with their cause. Travis constantly resisted and could be quite defensive with Lance. Travis had been so clueless as to why Lance even cared about him to begin with. After several attempts, Lance finally got Travis to visit the Parabdi Academy, and possibly just to get him to shut up. Travis had a dark past that he never spoke of. Lance had a very difficult time connecting to Travis, as he had been highly critical of the ways of Parabdis. According to Travis, he came to the realization that a lot of light-hearted ways of the Parabdis were childish and did not prepare the world for harsh realities. After a few sessions, Travis is gaining Lance's trust. He became more willing to tell his story. At some point, Travis spoke after such difficult efforts. Travis was once a happy apprentice who had a mentor, Gavin, who taught him all the ways of karate. Gavin was very imaginative and playful, and could not work with the Synexit. To Gavin, the Synexit represented this cold and heartless world. On one fateful occasion, Gavin went against the advice of the Synexit and got killed by a mob of vicious offsprings. After this, Travis abandoned his calling and joined a club set on giving the Synexit office absolute supremacy over the Parody. The Synexit office represented order to Travis after seeing the perils of Gavin's recklessness. After many efforts, Lance told Travis about his past. He told the story about his early days when he had a mentor of the Sixth Order of Anogrammatrons. Lance explained that his mentor was an outspoken loudmouth who spouted all kinds of offensive comments, though he thought he was just joking. No, Lance thought this guy was just joking. Later, Lance found out that this mentor meant all the intolerant and condescending things he had said, all out of fear of anything that threatened his notion of security. This mentor had later turned into a parody known as Whippo, and started spreading fear about anyone different. Lance told Travis about how he then pursued an apprenticeship with the Parody, and shares his story about having rescued the Mistivants being captive at a compound in a town known as Londinium. During this time, Travis still would not give up the name of the one who had sent him on a spy mission, and Lance allowed this, as he did not want anything bad to happen to Travis. The Kobold's departure and mission to Gamsoiled. The time had come for the Kobolds to leave their oasis paradise and find their way back to Hetaria. The Kobolds' time in the oasis had been so peaceful and thrilling. One evening the shaman returned to give them some instructions for their departure. The shaman asked the kobolds why they did not follow the instructions. Irigen explained that he had tried to veer left, but the tides were too strong. The shaman said it was simply not meant to be, and if they had easily gone left, the work camps would still be there, and the tonic business would still be distributing their garbage throughout Igletios. Before leaving, the shamans gave a kobold a box containing a map leading back to Hetaria. There was also this strange symbol on the map of a cave with a Celtic knot. During this time, the kobolds had been quite reluctant about returning to Hetaria. As it was, the kobolds started to develop a strong aversion towards civilization and society in general. The kobolds had forgotten what it was like to live in Hetaria, and only remembered their misery in Agrabah, Patamash, and the Phony Temple, the Pseudo-Londinium, and the work camp. All the kobolds had remembered of society was being forced to live in a slave-like condition with no freedom. The kobolds started seeing life in the desert aimlessly wandering as a pretty decent payoff. This map the kobolds received was a magical map, capable of showing the possessors exactly where on the map they were, and others nearby, such as threats. The map warns of wardens from the work camp who are nearby, and of snatchers from scattered Frogestein tribes. According to different accounts, the wardens sent out captors to travel the deserts in hopes of recapturing the travelers and bring them back to Egleftios and hold them prisoner in hidden locations this time. During this time, the kobolds started getting quite frustrated about how many wardens and snatchers were in the desert. On a few occasions, the kobolds had some close run-ins with these captors. This really started to reinforce the kobolds' hatred for civilization, and saw them as busybodies who could not just let them wander in the wilderness in peace. Back in Galacanium, the kobold James was still living in the town of Gamswell. As we recall, James was a leader who had the privilege of dwelling in the presence of the sacred fire years back, and brought a message to cease battle against the offsprings responsible for the fall of the bridge. The chamber of the sacred fire from the shelter had been glowing and calling for James. Now, because James had remained in Gamswell, he was not able to. James was simply afraid of what Lentinium had become, and never wanted to return. One evening the chamber called for the closest kobold, Gatsby. The voice told Gatsby that his messenger had turned away from his mission, and is in the land of Gamswell. The voice commands that Gatsby goes forth into the land of Gamswell to find the lost kobold. The voice tells Gatsby that the lost kobold has turned to stone and needs to be rescued. After this experience, Gatsby returns home and tells his family that he has been sent on a mission to rescue James. Now Gatsby's family is not too happy about this, and thought the mission back to Gamswell would be foolish and not worth the effort to find a traitor. Immediately Gatsby makes haste, late at night, through Londinium and back to the dreaded town of Gamswell. On the way to the town, Gatsby crossed that horrible river that he remembered the first time they ever entered into the town. Gatsby remembered all too well how this had been quite a slummy town, full of unhappy and severe workers with no sense of joy. At one point, Gatsby passed the Gamswell Inn and found out that Emasina and Troma still ran the place. Gatsby decided to take a visit in order to see if things were any worse. To his surprise, the residents living at the place got quite excited to see a kobold, as legend circulated about the one to stand up to Emasina and Troma. Gatsby told the residents all about Troma and Emasina's secrets, such as working with the Hypercordos, and Troma running the compound that used to exist in Londinium. While Gatsby was searching the town, He was grabbed by some hooded figure and is taken into an alley. Gatsby then sees another hooded figure saying, "Thank you, Horace." The two figures take off their hoods, and this man introduces himself as Severus. Now Gatsby knew he heard the name before, in a town before, but could not remember where. Severus asks Gatsby what happened to them. Gatsby is quite stumped, and Severus tells him it is no time for jokes. Gatsby still remains confused, and Horace tells Severus that he knows nothing. Severus asks Horace if he does not know that the kobolds have fraternized with the brats Natalia, Jaden, Fabinius, Hannah, and Taibi, and Tisha. Gatsby immediately puts it together and remembers how he helped these students travel to Hamataria. Gatsby then explains that he remembers now that Severus mentioned the names. Severus asks Gatsby what happened to them, and Gatsby explains that they went to Hamataria. Gatsby asks Severus what is in Hamataria. Severus explains that it is too dangerous and should not be asking such questions. Gatsby explains to Severus that he already knows more than he thinks. Horace decided to level with Gatsby and explains that there is something in Hamataria that needed to be protected from the traitor. Horace explains that this device, in the wrong hands, could be used for great evil. Gatsby explains that the traitor is Malpied and that he is dead. Gatsby told how Erebatus mentioned that he sought out an artifact in Hamataria and used it to his own detriment. Severus accepts Gatsby's story, and he explains that he and Horace are not after any secret power, but only trying to protect Heteria from the powers within. Gatsby explains that Tisha told this story. Horace looks a little embarrassed and tells Gatsby that it is still not wise to be wandering the streets in this town these days. Gatsby explained that he was looking for Jameis. Severus explains that Jameis had been on the Gamsol Council but got the boot and just disappeared, but they don't know where he went. A frosty winter. After the holiday season, Milo met with a representative from the job coaching agency and the job coach advisor. Ray came along and explained to the two that Milo was never good with places such as nursing homes and hospitals. According to the job agency, it was not uncommon for people to have difficulty working in these kinds of facilities. This agency promised Milo that if he did not like the job they got for him, they would help him find another one until he found the job that perfectly suited him. Over the winter, Milo was becoming gradually more moody. By this time, all the holiday celebrations had died down, and Milo had no more distractions from his thoughts about the job. One Friday morning, Milo was woken up early to babysit Abigail. Beforehand, Margaret had picked Abigail up from school as she was not feeling too well, and Aunt Diane could not as she had been at work that day. That day, Milo let Abigail watch some kids' movies. Milo got all the kids' DVDs he had from his younger days, including many Disney movies and some DreamWorks films. Abigail chose to watch Shrek 3. That weekend, Milo had wanted to go to St. Timothy's for Mass on Sunday. No, St. James for Mass, sorry about that. Milo had wanted to hear the responsorial psalm from that weekend, which was Psalm 40. Milo had remembered the Galileo psalm from 4th grade, which he considered as a predecessor to Dancing Day. Now, for some reason, the Biancatellos did not go to church on Saturday that weekend. When Milo had been downstairs working on the piano, Ray asked if he would want them to wake him up for Mass tomorrow in the morning. Milo said if he was up, he would wake up, but not to worry about it if he doesn't. Ray said that he preferred to go to church as a family. Milo started becoming resentful of living in a world where there were people who wanted him to do things he did not want to do. Milo had developed a very individualistic streak where he hated being accountable to anyone and felt his business was his own and his alone. Much of this had come from Milo's bad experience with the nursing home and feeling pressure to stick with a job he hated just to please others. Plus, it was not like Milo could givelessly quit as a family friend recommended him to begin with. Milo also felt jealous that Lydia had gone away to school and was supposedly more free from having to live under someone else's rules. Milo was also starting to understand how his parents had their imperfections. Milo said sometimes felt like he was still being babysat just because Ray and Margaret worked from home. As it was, Ray was in that out of sight, out of mind mode with Lydia, and with Milo he did not have this luxury. Milo knew well that he could take care of himself, as he was fine for all those years Ray and Margaret were in the office. Otherwise, Milo had not always been the most pleasant to be around and could get quite snarky if Ray gave him any unsolicited advice during working hours. Plus, Milo felt it annoying to have to let Ray and Margaret know everywhere he was going, should he go out during the day. Milo felt like Ray needed to give his opinion about everywhere he was going or try talking him out anywhere, much to his annoyance. During the last Sunday night of that month, Aunt Diane called at the house at about 10 o'clock p.m. Milo had just been practicing on his piano some Easter music. But Milo had some idea what was going on. This was confirmed once Aunt Diane called 3 more times. First on Ray's cell phone and then the house again. Milo answered the phone and Aunt Diane told Milo to wake Ray up. Ray told Milo that Grandpa Tony had passed away after getting off the phone with Aunt Diane. Then Ray left for the nursing home. During this time, Milo just sat around, as he knew that this was coming. Milo had known for a while that Tony was not exactly doing too good, and had been confined to being in a wheelchair, and was not really eating too well for the last few days. That Sunday morning, Ray called Lydia and Margaret let Grandma Pearl know. Lydia had taken it worse than she expected. Now Lydia thought she'd always been prepared for this, as she had seen the way Grandpa Tony had declined in the last year or so. That afternoon, Milo and Salvatore went for a hike. Now they didn't really talk too much about what happened. They were just both somewhat really happy that Grandpa Tony was out of that nursing home, as neither of them liked the nursing home to begin with. On Monday, Milo went to St. Timothy's with Aunt Michelle to help pick out some music for the funeral. They picked out the song, Here I Am, Lord, which was the same from Uncle George's funeral. The offertory, the communion hymn was Milo's choice, which had been I Receive the Living God, and the ending hymn was which was it? On Eagle's Wings, like at Grandma Rose's funeral years back. Actually, it had been 11 years since the showing was on Tuesday, and many people showed up, along with some work friends of Ray, some family friends, and some of the Williamsons too. And then other people like Marilyn and Ralph. The Mass was held at St. Timothy's that next day. The family made sure this would occur this way, as many residents from the rest home had their nursing home funerals done at the nursing home chapel. Eustace unfortunately did not come home for the funeral, while the rest of the family did. And Uncle Leo and Aunt Jane were utterly mortified. In fact, Aunt Jane apologized to Uncle Mike about Eustace's absence. Eustace's excuse was that he had a test. There had been more suspicion that Eustace was gay, as Grandpa Tony was very religious, and from a generation where homosexuality was not well understood. Even Lydia started to suspect something was up with Eustace, as he had many pictures on Facebook of hugging other guys and posing with drag queens. Others thought that Eustace was just acting standoffish, like he was too good and intelligent for his own family. When it came to the funeral, Milo, along with all the boy cousins, were pallbearers. Monsignor Warburton had been in the church to offer his condolences to the Biancatellis. The Mass was led by Monsignor Warner, as the family had wished. The opening songs as chosen were Here I Am, Lord, like at Uncle George's funeral, and the ending hymn was On Eagle's Wings, like at Grandma Rose's funeral. That night, Milo and Salvatore went over to Rob's to watch Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. This is some traveling movie with Stephen Martin and the deceased John Candy. On the way over, at the house that night, Rob was saying how he didn't think Eustace should have missed out on the funeral, considering he was only in Toledo, and how people from all over, how further away had come in. The day after the funeral, Milo had a meeting with his job coach agency. This had been the test to see what kind of jobs Milo fit best into. That week, Lydia had stayed in town until Sunday. On Friday, Milo got some news that Lydia and some of her college friends were going on spring break in Jamaica. Milo had been a bit jealous, considering that he never got a spring break and felt like his life had gotten so boring. Milo kind of started to begin going back, looking over his life and how he'd always seemed to be put into situations where he was around ghetto people and low-class trash, according to him, who just seemed to barely surviving and have no intention on ever doing anything meaningful or fun with their lives. Milo began his job assessment a week later through visiting different jobs and working in different types of environments. The first job for Milo was putting labels on boxes at a department store. The second job was cleaning up at a children's museum. The third job was working for a pizza shop. The fourth job occurred right before Ash Wednesday, which was dishwashing at Horses. The last job that Milo had was on a Friday and consisted of going through an art museum and looking at the exhibit debut. Milo got a little irritated one night for Ray for being overprotective. What happened was Milo wanted to drive down to the art museum on his own, but Ray was trying to talk him out of it. The second release plans. During this time, Rakshasajinns frequently had seen the recurring visions of hospitals and avoiding emergency departments and clinical sections. In fact, they had become overly annoyingly commonplace. Otherwise, Rakshasajinns had seen a new vision in the orb at the Hall of Akashic Prophecies. According to this vision, theirs was a world in the 1980s, before computers had been popular. The internet was only in its infancy. Televisions had a lower resolution and still pretty small, with fewer options, and kitchen appliances were all goldenrod. Rakshasajinns brings this concern to Therese for some assistance. Otherwise, the visions were getting otherwise bleaker, and the concrete mall scenes are still recurring, and video game scenes are also frequently being seen. Therese then starts to understand what is keeping those stuck in the Sarkikos realm. Therese notices that the visions have a bleak attitude towards the 1980s and sees this as a primitive time due to knowledge not being immediately available. According to Therese, those stuck in the community had still been satisfied with their own knowledge and only saw anything transcending knowledge as nothing more than a dumping ground for intellectual burdens. Otherwise, Therese had seen the signs that those stuck in the community now know of some very little reality, transcending any of the synectic principles, but have no interest in even leaving. Otherwise, Therese now sees with these video game sequences that those stuck in the community are on a pursuit of aimless adventures, and using adventure game scenarios to feel a part of something more important. Out of nowhere, the anagrammatron Bartemius showed up. Bartemius explained that he had been making some observations, and that many were after the hand of the fate. Therese knew exactly what this meant, and was quite distraught to hear this. Daxivius chimed in and explained that this desire to possess the fate was rooted in this need to have oneself re-empowered. According to Daxivius, those stuck in the Sarkikos community have been dominated in every way possible. Bartemius explains that he had seen something like this before. According to Bartemius, those in the community want to dominate and run the community their own way. Therese explained that in such communities they don't feel at home one bit. First off, the communities are utterly boring, and do not cater to their desire for some transcendent joy. Secondly, those trapped are bound by their laws, and under the same shame sentence for not being a way that this community approves of. Essentially, the community is the final say, and all opposition to the other is the other side's problem. Therese explains that this power to impose a shame and guilt sentence violates the private spaces of the inner life of the individual. Bartemius explains that this is not acceptable, and the community should be charged if they are behaving this way. Therese explains that the problem is not the existence of the community, but that there are mortals trapped in the community who should not be there. Eventually, Pandora arrives with grim news. Pandora explains that the second release of the Tamoras is at hand. Therese explains that the Shadows were just released over a year ago. Pandora explains that this is true, but another release is necessary sooner than later, in order to let those trapped in the Sarkikos community see the darkness of the pursuit of power, and how this Synexit Sarkikos community will never be satisfying. Pandora also mentioned that the Sarkikos community had no real sustenance of its own, no matter what they say. Pandora explained that the cords joining the Sarkikos and home communities are the only thing making the Sarkikos community seem anywise appealing. These cords connecting the Sarkikos community are being mistaken for sacred places within the community. Pandora explains that during this release, many cords will be broken, and those sacred spaces in the Sarkikos community will be revealed to only have any sacredness from a source beyond them. Harmony's discovery. Harmony had become quite adventurous and curious tween. Unfortunately, Marina still had some strict rules, and would not let Harmony officially leave the house. On multiple occasions, Harmony still swam in the estate pond, and got quite good at being able to swim pretty quickly. On one occasion, Harmony snuck out and went for a swim in the pond and went pretty deep. While swimming through these murky waters, Harmony saw this bright light and swam ever deeper to find it. Harmony could out of nowhere hold her breath for a significantly long period of time and quickly found the source of this golden light. To Harmony's surprise, she found a locket. When Harmony swam back to the shore with the locket, she found her name inscribed on the object. Harmony sneaks the locket back into her room when Marina is not looking. Harmony is quite curious about how a locker with her name got into the pond, and thought it strangely coincidental. That night, after Marina goes to bed, Harmony tells the locket to open, which somehow recognized her voice. When the locket opens, a holographic man appears, telling her that she can open the locket. It means that she is ready to learn of her destiny. The holographic man explains to Harmony that he is her grandfather, and she is destined to greatness. Harmony learns of her destiny to break the divisions between these lands, known as Hetaria and Parthenia. Harmony's grandfather tells her that she will begin her journey at the dawn of her 13th year, when the locket tells her to find these misty lamps, Prescott and Cagliari. On a couple occasions, Harmony brought up growing up and some getting married and finding a career. Marina makes it very clear that Harmony is never ever to leave her estate, come hell or high water. Marina reminds Harmony that the outside world is a dangerous and cruel world, and if she really loved her mother, she would never ever put her in such a situation. Over the next few years, Harmony continued to read books in the library about the geography of the land, the history of the region, and political negotiations. Harmony had wondered why this holographic man thought he was her grandfather, considering that Marina's parents both died long before she was born. Yet, so Harmony thought. Yet Harmony knew nothing of her father, and thought maybe her maternal grandfather was still out there somewhere and could help her. Over the days, Harmony tried asking Marina about her father, and she would not tell her to concern herself about such silly matters. Frankly, Harmony was becoming quite suspicious about why her mother refused to talk to her father, and wondered what kind of horrible person he must be. But then she wondered why her grandfather would be sending her on a mission in the first place. The establishment of Walking Dead. During this time, Gustavet and Baldrod had their times of difficulty working with each other. Baldrod tended to favor less intrusive solutions, and tended to place higher priority on the individual's rights. Gustavet, on the other hand, tended to favor more hands-on solutions, and considered getting involved more important than leaving things alone. When it came to Melindo's charge, they both knew that he was having a hard time with the pressure he was under to stay in a horrible job. According to Baldred, this charge had no duty to stick to a job so long as he was not mooching off of others, and is pretty motivated to find a new one. Gustav looked at it through the point of view of contributing to society and how the child was doing something necessary, and that quitting as he did could have done such harm to his co-workers' reputation. Baldwin explained that the charge never asked to be recommended and that the job was not so meaningful, considering he was working at a place that kept a captive audience. Around this time, Brutus was still angry about having to be under Lance, and was constantly looking for a way to take back the throne. Not to mention, Brutus was quite furious about how popular Angel had become, and that the show reached a level of popularity that undermined his influence like the days of House of Anubis and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. In order to smear Lance's reputation on Earth, Brutus decided to make a mockery of Daniel and Oscar's work, and mimicked him by plotting for the establishment of the show Walking Dead without Melendez's permission, may I add you? Brutus knew well that the show was the perfect representation of what happens when there is no altar. Brutus believed that once the mortals saw the kind of violence and fear that the show represented with that altar, people would be running back to his domain. Melendez was not thrilled about this in the slightest of what Brutus had done, but knew it may be necessary for days to come. Now Melendez knew well that there had been quite some hostility towards order, and did not understand why this had all of a sudden happened. By this time, Melendez knew that Pandora may be unleashing the Timoras again. As to why, Melendez did not know, but Melendez did suspect that the establishment of these shows may come in handy. Frankly, Melendez never cared for the show, and considered the program to be utterly nihilistic, and doomed to have repeating plots with no resolution, just going on indefinitely. The Lent season. On Ash Wednesday, Milo tried going to St. James, but was unable to due to getting the significant Mass times wrong. During Lent, Milo went to confession about 3 times. The first time, Milo went with Father Warburton on Thursday after Ash Wednesday in the church's office. Father Warburton told Milo that he seems to struggle with pride. Milo had explained that he had been frustrated with his parents' imperfection. Milo confessed the difficulty he was having over never having gone away to college, and felt envious about Lydia being on her own, and not having to have parents involved with her everyday life. Milo knew it was just a matter of out of sight, out of mind, but still wished that Ray could be better about this. Otherwise, Milo was having some difficulties with matters of accountability. After his funk the previous year in the nursing home, Milo hated accountability. Now Milo saw accountability as a necessary evil, so agreements could be kept, such as plans and business deals, or protecting people from being violated. Otherwise, Milo was no fan of accountability, and did not find any justification on somebody imposing their interest on another, and considered it best for 2 parties with conflicting interests just to agree to disagree and part ways. Milo had remembered with Maltech how how he thought the teachers should have just only taught and made assessments to tell the students if they understood the material. Milo remembered the experience of teachers like Deville and Roberta having no business holding students accountable on matters such as loyalty to the school, or reason for pursuing an education outside past school. When it came to fundamentalists, all Milo saw was worshipping some big father-brother figure who did not care about individuals but sure wanted them to behave or think a certain way, and would punish them if they did not. With the fundamentalists, Milo saw them as being just a bunch of self-righteous and uncaring jerks, and hated how they tried to hold people accountable, whether on the streets protesting funerals, getting into politics, or trolling blogs and YouTube videos. When it came to the nursing home, Milo hated that they tried holding him accountable beyond what he consented to, or any of their concern. As Milo saw it, he consented to do certain tasks for the dietary department, and that they had no business over whether he was there in order to pursue a career in healthcare, or was working because he needed a job. On the second week of Lent, Milo, Margaret, Ray, and Salvatore went to the St. Rocco's Italian dinner at the church. This church hosts the Italian festival and is located in Newsenberg, not too far from where Grandma Rosa grew up. The priest who presided that Mass was Father Mazzano, whom Milo recognized as the priest he had confession with after he blew an F-bomb at Salvatore. As for the dinner, this had many authentic dishes handed down from many Italian families in the St. Paul area. This had been for the St. Joseph's Day dinner. The next day, Milo, Aunt Michelle, Ray, and Salvatore went to the Maple Festival out in Susewego. At the festival, they saw Danielle and Melina. During the excursion, Milo had a bit of a stomachache after eating a tomato stuffed with cold ham from the night before. Why Milo ate that, he should not have. During this time, Milo went to open meetings with a job coaching agency. With the agency. One Saturday, Milo went to Aunt Michelle's for polenta night. At church that night before, there was a mediocre sub-organist only capable of playing the piano. The next day, Milo went to church again at St. James so he could hear the Galeno version of Psalm 95, which he did not hear the year before thanks to the recitation of the psalm. Milo gave the strange reason for doing so and wanting to hear the organ. Melendal's plan. Melendal and Lance knew well that this charge needed all this time. No, oh great. Melendal's plans. Melendal and Lance knew well what the charge needed at this time. The two met in the Inanian temple to discuss plans for the upcoming spring festivities. Melendal knew that his charge needed some experience connecting him beyond the realms, even beyond the elements. Lance suggested that the charge experience some unique and transcendent experience beyond the ordinary. Melendel knew that his charge needed to get back in touch with his spiritual heritage after such a long time away. Lance, on the other hand, knew that the charge needed to get in touch with something quite thrilling, and had been looking in other out-of-the-way places. Melendel knew that the charge had been looking in the wrong places that would only lead to delusion and humiliation. Melendel then understood how the charge had suffered from such dullness for a long time, and had little fullness of living. Lance knew quite well that the charge felt like his life had turned into one boring experience where he had to sacrifice living in order to survive. One Satyasha offspring, known as Propetus, had been loitering around the temple grounds and overheard what Melendel and Lance were speaking of. Propetus brought this news to his boss, who he never revealed the name of. Both Propetus and his boss developed a manipulative plan to trick Melendel's charge. Propetus's boss hated the charge and wanted to break his will, since his name was first written on the books of the living. The Feast of the Flood and Re-establishment. Back in Londinium, Durnil returned to announce the Feast of the Flood and the rebirth of the Great Phoenix was to take place. Now, this feast had not been celebrated since the kobolds left for Downsfield many years ago. In fact, the kobolds did not know if they were allowed to hold this feast unless the headquarters was up. The kobolds remembered the time when the Meludicas were giving them grief and they got possessed by the Furies and Timoras. There was no Feast of the Flood, which was before the headquarters was even set up. Then the feast was not held for 2 years after the earthquake destroyed their headquarters. The shelter was still intact and completely untainted like the days when the flood first hit. During this time, the feast commemorating the history of Londinium had been strictly banned, especially the Feast of the Flood. Both the Hanatarians and Uguric agreed to have this feast banned, but for two very different reasons. One evening at dusk, Durnil called the kobold to wait outside the shelter, and called the Geronites to join them in the outside of the shelter. Then Durnil made glorious declarations of the Phoenix returning back to Londinium. Durnil explained that he had to leave and would have Junus take over. Durnil explained that he had to give blessing to start another feast to those in the desert. This year the feast was declared to remember the fidelity of the dance in having sent the flood in ages past, and his promise to repurify Heteria again by fire. On the evening when the feast was to begin, while the Geronites and kobolds had been waiting, Junus shows up with some acolytes holding torches. Junus then leads the congregants into the shelter, which had been quite dark. The only light had come from Junus's torch. The feast that particular night had been much more solemn of an affair, as they remember the days when the heavens flooded otherworldly waters and cleansed the sea. Junus called for the feast to be held every year until divisions were broken. The kobolds and Geronites vowed to keep the solemnity until the Hanatarians and New Girite returned back to loyalty to the covenant with the headquartered kobolds. The feast was still celebrated in secrecy. One Garanite declared in some otherworldly voice that the great phoenix will return, arrayed in gold and breath of flame. After this, Junus had the acolytes light the rest of the torches within the shelter, and the facility became well lit. Meanwhile, in the desert, the kobolds got instruction by a map to head to a secret cave. Many kobolds protested this as a trap. Eusephus, who had been the map bearer, reminded the kobolds that the shaman was the one to give them the map and would not mislead them. Now Eusephus knew that the kobolds were a bit apprehensive, as they were still constantly avoiding the snatchers and wardens. One morning, the map shone bright, and the cave legend grew bright hot, with a message saying, "Make haste immediately to the cave." There was also a text saying, "Feast of the Flood." Now the kobolds recognized this Feast of the Flood. Remember this quite well. After this journey, the kobolds found this strange cliff full of pathways, seemingly going nowhere. Then the kobolds noticed some others had gathered at this one dead end, but they did not know what to do either. One of them called, "We're here for the Feast of the Flood. Anyone else?" Then two stone doorways opened, and the kobolds entered this cave. The kobolds entered in with these other visitors and walked through the stony and dark hallways until they saw the light and drew ever closer. In this lit room, the kobolds saw many gathered, including escapees from the work camp: Natalia, Jaden, Fabinius, Hannah, Taibi, and the shaman. Many dispersed Azarians, Shematorians, and Hamatorians, and to their surprise, Dernil. The kobolds also came across their friend Abraham and Saria. Abraham explained that this was where his father's company used to be before he shut down and sold it. Abraham explained how he and Saria had been on a quest to find his father Tira. Abraham explained that Tira had been kidnapped by his former boss Philistine. Taibi immediately recognized this name, and he explained that Philistine was the one who was his master before. Taibi explained that Philistine was the one who plotted for the kobolds to be captured by the raptors, to be taken to Agrabah. For a long time, the kobolds thought that being taken to Agrabah was an accident. Abraham explained how after he escaped slavery in Agrabah, many of the other Shematorians did the same, and many slaveholders lost their slaves. Abraham tells the kobolds about how Agrabah is the financial district and town of the present Shematoria. Marinda explained that Hagabad was pretty loyal to Agrabah. Abraham explained that this was only because Agrabah did him many favors for them. According to the instructions, anyone who showed up at the caves was to be unconditionally welcome to sit at the fire. As it was arranged, only those with goodwill would be given the secret location of this fire. Dernil explained that this was the Feast of the Flood and rebirth of the Great Phoenix. Dernil asked the kobolds if they remember the feast that was celebrated back in Londinium. The Hamitarians present held a similar feast at the same time in the year of observation of the righteous Ram Amit. The Azorians and Shemitarian tribes had feasts quite similar but varying from nation to nation. During the feast, Daniel declared that the great phoenix will return and water the lands, reviving these lands and the seeds. On this day there will be a great extinguishing on the great mountains, and the days of feasting will be reinstated. Daniel then declared that the kobolds on the land and others in the desert would be the ones to herald the great phoenix. Daniel declared that the lands of Azaria and Shemitariah will be reinstated back to their old glory. Now the kobolds have been quite happy to celebrate this solemn fest with their friends from Hamitariah, along with the people they had met on the oasis. Plus, the kobolds enjoyed being able to commune with other misdevoutants without having to worry about being caught by snatchers or wardens. Daniel showed the kobolds around this cave, which was quite comfortable and homey. In fact, the cave had many private, comfortable rooms similar to an inn. The Easter season. Before Easter, the Biancotellos went to Akron to see Lydia on her birthday. That morning before, Milo went to confession again. Milo still felt like he had a hard time standing up to people he was close to. Milo had this new concern when there were any conflicting interests with people close to him. Milo felt it was easier to tell a busybody or an enemy to screw off, but felt it was harder to say no to a friend or family member. During this time, Milo was still having flashbacks to a serious concern, always meaning someone was trying to place a security restriction, which Milo called the benevolent party poopers. After confession, Milo drove out. The Biancotellos drove out to Akron. They went for dinner at a meatball restaurant. One weekend later, Ray and Milo went to an indoor football game. At the game, Milo saw the newscaster Jasmine, and he saw his cousin Julie's husband with their kids. Otherwise, on the way home from the game, Ray asked Milo about going down to Akron for Lydia's graduation. Frankly, Milo was not interested in going, as he knew it was going to be a long weekend. Not to mention, Milo just wanted a weekend to himself. Just to do what he wanted to do without anyone asking where he was going, his motives for doing so, or hearing anyone's opinions on the matter. Milo was still having a difficult time with social relationships. When it came to family, this could be quite difficult, as Milo could not just ignore them over conflicting interests. On the weekend before Palm Sunday, Aunt Jackie's father passed away. During this year, many grandfather figures passed away, including Grandpa Paul, Grandpa Tony, Aunt Jane's father, and now Aunt Jackie's father. That Sunday, there was a penance service Milo once again went to. Before that Sunday, Milo also went to church with his family. Now, Milo went through the procession, which his family did not care to go to. When it came to the penance service, Milo was still bothered by these types of matters of accountability, and as he was angry about opponents or self-serving types who ever held him accountable, and the dilemma about those close holding him accountable. For Milo, he did not believe that accountability was really necessary in personal relationships, as they would be on the same page. Otherwise, Milo still had some grudges with what happened at the nursing home. The priest gave Milo some standard advice to try to forgive, just kind of, or to be all forgiving and say some type of hanging from the cross devotion. Now Milo knew that this priest was particularly new, and like many new ones, tended to not always take really tended to go by the book when it came to religion, and always thought that any kind of problems could be solved by silly affirmations or penances like the 10 Hail Marys or 4 Our Fathers. After, on that Tuesday, no, it was Tuesday or Wednesday, I think it was, either Tuesday or Wednesday, the Biancatellis went out to the funeral home for Aunt Jackie's father. After the viewing, Margaret and Ray asked Milo if he would consider going down to the graduation if he got to see Olivia, Jonathan, and Rowan. Margaret had told Milo how much this would mean to Lydia if he came. Otherwise, Milo mentioned that he would be going to the Easter Vigil on Saturday night. On Holy Thursday, Milo and Salvatore went out to a farm that sold raw milk. During the time, Milo was still a pretty big proponent of natural medicine. As it was, Salvatore had some hernia that the doctors only suggested surgery for. But he eventually found the chiropractor, as we knew, not using invasive methods that worked better for him. Milo became more interested in what Salvatore knew and decided to try some natural products. That night, Lydia and her friend Laura came in town for the Easter holiday. That night, Milo watched the movie Ants, which reminded him of modern American society. Milo had remembered watching the movie on Holy Thursday when he was 10, the same time he saw A Bug's Life in theaters. For Milo, he saw the general as being no different than George Bush. Then Milo saw them as being nothing but a bunch of neocon fascists, and started noticing how similar the Bush administration was to what had happened in Nazi Germany and the movie, such as making up some claims to false enemies, and justify going to war. Plus Milo saw how, in the movie, the whole town was built on the back of pointless labor. That's it. Then on Friday, the Biancatellis went to church for the Good Friday service with Laura. That Saturday morning, Milo did a meditation where he felt that he needed to forgive others over the nursing home job. Milo realized after this session that he was angrier with those who pressured him to stick with the job than the people at the job itself. On Saturday night after dinner, Margaret tried to convince Milo to go out with Lydia and Laura to the bars. When Lydia asked him earlier, Milo declined as he had plans to go to church. Margaret told Milo that she thinks he would have more fun with at the bars, and Milo got a bit annoyed with this, as he wanted to go to church instead. Lydia told him how it was pointless to go tonight when the family would be going tomorrow, and Margaret told Milo that he could go to the Easter Vigil next year. Milo had likewise got annoyed about this situation. Lydia trying to rationalize him into changing his mind, and the very universe that has people who cannot accept his decisions and try to change his mind. Milo also felt like his family was being overprotective, as he was planning on attending church at St. James in downtown Essex at dusk. Milo started thinking that no one would be saying this if he couldn't go to the bars because of work, but is forced out of doing something he wants to do. Milo decided to go to the Easter Vigil at St. James, possibly to show his family that he does not need their overprotection, even though St. Timothy's was not that far away and much closer. By about 8:30, Milo left the house and drove through the waters of Side Pond into the Essex region and arrived in downtown Essex. Milo got into the church, and now the service was scheduled to start outside with the lighting of the Easter fire. Milo had been a bit anxious about being in downtown Essex that late at night, but figured it was worth the risk. As soon as Milo got into the church, there was a woman at the cathedral doors passing out candles. One attendee told Milo not to take his coat off because they would be going outside pretty soon and not to get comfortable. After a few minutes of waiting in the cold church, the deacon announced that the lighting of the fire would soon begin. By 9 o'clock, the sun had completely set, and all the congregants had all departed the church and congregated into the streets. Up to this time, the Easter fire was lit, and the bishop did a blessing of the Paschal candle, and started off with the opening prayers. The street had been blocked off, so the congregants could stand around the fire. Milo had found something a bit haunting about this ceremony, like it was some secret meeting. After the fire, the congregants processed into the church. While entering the church, the deacon holding the candles started chanting, "The light of Christ, thanks be to God. The light of Christ, thanks be to God." And so did it for a little bit longer. This chant sounded quite similar to the Eucharistic chants used at Mass. Once everyone had congregated, the rector priest had chanted the Exsultet. This is an ancient hymn telling the history of salvation. This had been the first time Milo ever heard the hymn sung in church before, which sounded similar to the chants used in the Eucharistic prayers. There was a great vision in the church of angels standing around the throne, in exaltation praising the triumphant Lord. Then there is an invisible light spread throughout the church. Then great majestic visions appeared of the triumphant one, breaking the chains of Adam, raising high the Dead Sea, and defeating the world powers through a great pillar of fire. Then there was a scene of Jesus breaking free from the netherworld. Then there was this strange and otherworldly vision of a mighty bridge being built, connecting the temple town to this posh garden on the high cliffs. A group of congregants arrived, and one statue of a terrifying bull and a beautiful maiden was set up in the garden. Then a group of bees delivered a candle to the maiden, gifted the congregants with his golden candle stand. At sunset, the congregants began the ceremony, and the bull lit the torch that purified the garden air, making it livable. Then an elder with a white beard called for this story to be told throughout the ages. Then the Mass began as normal, with 3 readings done in pitch dark. The first reading was from the first chapter of Genesis, retelling the creation of the earth. Then the responsorial psalm was sung, Psalm 104, Lord, send out your Spirit and renew the face of the earth, in the Gileno tone, retelling the creation according to King David. Then the second reading came from the book of Exodus, where Moses and the Israelites were cornered at the Red Sea, and the Lord raised the waters, giving the Hebrews passage and destroying the armies of Pharaoh and his charioteers. Then the Canticle of Moses was sung, based on Exodus 15, as done when the first Passover was sung. Then they sang, Sing to the Lord, for he is gloriously triumphant. Horse and chariot are cast into the sea. The final reading was from the book of Ezekiel. The responsorial Psalm 51 was sung as a choral motet from the 16th century. There first was a vision of a doctor who had gotten framed for using traditional Ayurvedic treatment not approved by the FDA, and getting framed for drug abuse on the job. While the church was in still darkness, there were countless figures of those who abused their power at some point, and authority, and looking over the congregants. Some with self-righteous scowls, and others with these obnoxious looks of concern. Then the hand was raised, and the sea washed away these hallucinations with a big, I forgive you. After the Old Testament reading, the cantor sang, Glory to God in the highest, and peace on earth to people of good will. Then the lights all came on, and the organ thundered a majestic fanfare, and the rest of the Gloria chant was continued. After the Gloria, the epistle was read, and the Alleluia was sung for the first time since before Ash Wednesday. This is the Alleluia that uses a pretty long chant style. Then the Gospel was read by the parochial victor. The bishop then gave a sermon on Christianity transcending ethics and duties, but living experience. During these moments, the church reminded Milo of a trip he took to the Toledo Aquarium before his freshman year, and the Holy Week of his 10th grade year when he first noticed the mirror. During the baptism rite, there was a vision of a shadow of a whale swimming by the stained glass similar to the Prince of Egypt scene when the Israelites crossed the Red Sea. This gave the congregants a great sense of peace, even if they were in the middle of downtown Essex in pitch night. During the Litany of the Saints, there was a vision of many spirits, including Grandma Gladys, Grandma Rosa, Grandpa Tony, Uncle Giorgio, Aunt Adrienne, Uncle Victor, Uncle Luigi, Uncle John, Aunt Adrienne, Ginny, Grandma Dora, Grandpa Juan, Grandpa Paul, and the other two deceased grandfathers, other recently deceased pets, and many other deceased friends and relatives such as Mrs. Romero and the old organist Tom. They all assisted Milo as he was prepared for battle against the powers of darkness. The communion hymn was "This is the Day the Lord Has Made" by Lucian Diaz. During communion, there was a great vision of a Passover feast in which a new day was made. Then the band of angels kept singing, "This is the day the Lord has made, let all the earth rejoice, Alleluia." Then there was a majestic vision of the Messiah, whose blood was shed and the powers of death were utterly humiliated. Then there were many in the bowels of Hades, waiting in despair until the Lamb enters into this place of doom and restores the splendor of the new life. The closing hymn at Mass was "Jesus Christ is risen today." After Mass, there was a piece playing on the organ of some type of classical music heralding the Easter season, just beginning that very night. That night, after the Mass, Milo had a dream about finding a book with a picture of the Jafaris and the leaving for vacation. On Easter, Milo went back to St. Timothy's with his family, but it was nothing like the St. James Easter Vigil. In fact, they didn't even use the organ at all because they had the children's choir. Milo felt like the Easter Sunday Mass had been no comparison with the previous night. Milo bought some lamb and sausage to Easter dinner at Uncle Leo and Aunt Jane's. Salvatore, Rob, Milo, and Ray were the only ones to even eat the lamb. Now, as to why nobody else would eat lamb but would eat other pieces of meat had been quite mysterious. Plus, Milo thought they would have been used to it, considering that back in Italy it was quite common to eat lamb. After Easter, Milo and the Biancatellos went down to Apollon for Lydia's college graduation. Milo was not thrilled about going down, as he wanted a weekend to himself. What happened, as we know, was Ray had tried to convince Milo that they would get to do all kinds of fun stuff in Akron, and that he would get to babysit Olivia, Jonathan, and Rowan. Then they said there would be an after-grad party. They even promised Milo could pick the church on Sunday. As it was, none of these plans came into fruition. Around this time, Milo had felt annoyed with having his parents around all the time. as they were working from home, and originally Milo planned on staying home and having the weekend to himself. For a while, Ray was constantly trying to talk Milo up with whatever he had planned on going to, which Milo found greatly annoying. Plus, Milo did not like the whole college system to begin with. Milo felt that Lydia was being given dangerously wrong information on economics. Part of what Milo hated about the college system was how they oftentimes could uproot students from their heritage and have them start their lives all over again. This is what Milo experienced with Maltech, only the way they did it was more explicit than any universities do. This is keeping in mind that Milo never got a great experience with secondary education, as Maltech was utterly miserable for him, and he never truly got close with Susawago. Plus, Milo remembered having nearly turned into a sellout in his first year at Susawago. Milo also felt like his parents always expected the family life to revolve around Lydia, as she tended to have more social, school-based activities and priorities. Milo always got the impression that he always had to make the sacrifices for Lydia, and felt like she was being rewarded for being a sheeple. Otherwise, Milo was kind of a pain in the butt over that weekend, such as not going to the graduation ceremony and sitting at Lydia's apartment for the time, and then complaining about how he never gets weekends off, or he can never get a weekend away just to himself. After coming home from Akron for the graduation, Milo was in a foul mood. A few days later, Milo had a meeting with his job coaching center, and Ray was out golfing. On the way home, Milo purposely drove by a gentleman's club and thought about stopping in, but chickened out and felt too embarrassing and drove right past it. After having gone to Las Vegas, Milo got a bit of a taste for thrill after working around humdrum nursing homes for 7 months. Milo also started to fear that the greater Essex County, including Cider Pond, would turn into dead towns like Newsomburg and Phyllisville. For a while, Milo had been resentful and bitter about ever having a job at a nursing home, and was under the impression that this hometown was going to turn into some cesspool that took away all options, that required one to have to sacrifice living in order to survive. Milo had been disgruntled about how Essex could have so many nursing homes, but not so many casinos like Las Vegas had. Milo also had been a bit annoyed about Akron, and considered this region to be a stuck-up city sucking people out of small towns so these big cities could be great. When Milo got back from golf, he found Milo to be in a strangely foul mood. When Ray got back from golf, he found Milo to be in a strangely foul mood. Milo then came out and admitted that he was still angry over graduation and how he felt bribed to go. Milo then complained about how he was so pressured to stay with a nursing home job by his coworker, and how he was sick of seeing Essex region turning to a dump like Phyllisville and Newsomburg. The opening of old wounds. Melendel knew the time was near for Pandora to release the Timorans on Earth for a second time. One evening, Yoriyama appeared to Melendel Speaking of a vision of these healed but infected cuts that needed to be broken again in order to be legitimately healed. Then Yuriyama explains the next part of the vision, where the Timuras snap the snitches wide open and many dark spirits of the belly of Tartarus are unleashed. Melendel glumly shares his fears that the Timuras having been released on Earth again. Melendel then calls to Lance to join him and Yuriyama on a meeting. Melendel understands that the only way for these wounds to be broken is to reveal some very crucial information. At this, Melendel gives Lance a mission to inform one charge about the whereabouts of another charge, but to be discreet. Lance understands his mission and asks if this is all just a trick. Melendel explains that some great healing will come forth, but only if the darkness can escape. During the meeting, an Alex appeared with news that he had spotted the Hubertogi known as the Fates. Melendel had not been surprised about this news, and had suspected that the Fates had been active since he knew the offsprings, in the form of the Queen, first appeared at the cathedral, and had been active a number of times since. Melendel knew well that the offspring Rakshasajinns had no capabilities to control the Hubertagis. As it was, all the hypochonders and the melodicas were all being watched over. Melendel then had a terrible insight of something he remembered years ago, when there was a vision of the Archon Galtron, who is the king of tyrants. Melendel started to become suspicious that Galtron had something to do with why Milo got into Maltech fundamentalism in the nursing home, and feared he would strike soon again. Weary adventures. After the feast of the guests, the kobolds traveled past the caves where the feast was being held, and found this tropical region. Now the kobolds knew that this forested area and the hilly region were well secluded and way beyond the bounds of the Phlogiston and Neglectios. Overall, being in this place had been quite a relief, as they had been sick of trying to hide from snatchers and wardens. This time in the tropics proved to be quite tranquil in the beginning. After a while, the kobolds started feeling empty, and could not help but think such excitement was meaningless when something was so missing. During this time, in the tropical regions, the kobolds found many rocks to climb on, oases to swim in, and caves to explore, but found themselves dissatisfied and longing to return back to Heteria. All of this enjoyment seemed like a mere shadow of what they experienced in their homeland and friends still in Heteria. Ioannes then started to really miss Rivka and Harmony, as this land reminded him of things they used to do together when they first met in Parthenia. Soon enough, the kobolds all agreed that they wanted to return to Heteria. As it was, the kobolds knew well that it's quite toilsome to be around Mr. Vance, who condemned them, but found that loneliness was just as bad, if not worse. Well, actually not as bad. At the base point, the kobolds looked at a map and pinpoint the quickest path to get back to Heteria. The kobolds realized, according to the map's instructions, that this would be a very dangerous path. The path had some steep mountains, deep trenches, and regions full of thorny plants. The kobolds knew that this would be no easy journey, that would require great sacrifice. Returned to Orlando. Around this time, Milo found out that Amira was attending Wheeling College. On one occasion, Milo got lunch at a Thai restaurant in downtown Essex and took it over to the picnic area of the campus building that he suspected Amira to have a class at. Milo had no such luck, as he never saw Amira in that brief time he had spent at the school. Around the same time, Margaret had been in Orlando for a business meeting. During this time, Melina also makes her first communion. For Melina's first communion, Milo gives her a present he had from the last year for Ashlyn's communion. Milo had bought a bracelet across the street from the nursing home. One weekend later, Milo watched the Chronicles of Narnia. Milo knew that weekend he would soon be leaving for Orlando. Milo was a bit apprehensive, as he had a sense that getting away from Cyberpunk and into a city full of entertainment may not be the answer to his frustrations. On Monday, Milo, Ray, and Lydia went to the Cyberpunk International Airport and flew to Toledo in order to catch a plane in Orlando. Milo had felt a little depressed about leaving and thought he would miss Cyberpunk while he was away. Milo developed a strange appreciation for the town now that he was away. In the airport, there was a vision of the suffering servant who came down to Earth and joined the human race, only to be handed over to the state for slaughter. Then this servant is exalted highly, and every knee bows and declares this servant as the Lord. That evening when they arrived in Orlando, they drove to the hotel they would be staying at. So far, Milo did not have any euphoria like he had when arriving in Tampa. But he did feel a little different than... It did feel a little greener than Vegas had. Being back in Florida had not been quite the euphoric experience Milo had when in Tampa years back. On the first day in Orlando, Milo, Ray, and Lydia went into downtown Disney to exchange cars. This experience felt a bit weird, as Milo had a nostalgia for the Disney trip he went on after graduating high school, but felt like this place was a mere shadow of what he experienced after high school. The first day, Milo felt a bit lonely and not sure his individualistic tendencies were working out so well. Milo knew that he wanted to get away so bad as to be in a place without these nosy companies, but a city he did not know did not seem so appealing right now. By the second day, Milo got into a better mood. That day, Milo mostly read by the pool. Milo had reading lots of ethics and philosophy books at the time. In the late afternoon, Ray took Milo and Lydia for a drive to a strip mall which had a Disney store. For dinner that night, Milo, Ray, and Lydia ate at a Cuban restaurant. So far, this had been Milo's best in Orlando, I mean. For dinner, they got this pork roast known as Little Masalo and a Cuban-style paella, along with some things of black beans and rice, and some yuca. On the second day, Ray, Lydia, and Milo got dinner at a Mexican restaurant that made guacamole right at the table. After dinner, the drive through the Orange County area had not been so euphoric, and did not offer the same surprises he remembered from Tampa or Disney World. That Friday, Margaret got reservations for a fancy restaurant on the resort campus, which she had got through work. That evening, Milo started getting some flashbacks to his last days in Las Vegas and the anxiety he experienced before heading back. This was considering that Milo still had 2 more days of vacation. That Saturday, the Bianca Tellers all went out for barbecue at a restaurant not too far from Grandpa Clarence and Maple Carroll's house. After dinner, they drove past the house and knocked on the door, but no one was home. Milo thought this was quite silly, as Grandpa Clarence and Maple Carroll would not be expecting them. Then they drove to the Walt Disney World campus, which gave Milo some more pleasant flashbacks to his vacation after high school. On the last day, the family went to Universal Studios and met with Uncle Doug and Aunt Pam. This was the first time the Bianca Tellers saw the new Harry Potter section of the park, as Milo had wanted to see. For the park, Milo liked this new Harry Potter area. In fact, it gave him more flashbacks to the books. That day, Milo got to try butterbeer for the first time. Otherwise, the park developers were still working on the Diagon Alley area, which would not be done for another month. For the most part, the Bianca Tellers had seen all the same attractions as they had when they went to the park the first year 4 years earlier. That night, after leaving the park, Milo felt a bit out of sorts, as it did not seem like Florida had been quite the big deal he remembered so many years ago. Now Milo was not thrilled about going back, as he was not so sure that Cider Pond would be so exciting, after he had just been in Orlando.